Now, do not forget this anatomy, because there is going to be quite a bit of overlap as we talk about the shoulder girdle. So things like that capitulum, that trochlea, those epicondyles are still all going to come into play, especially in the positioning realm when we talk about shoulder positioning. Because remember how Leah was telling you guys about those epicondyles being parallel, being perpendicular, things like that? That's going to play a large part in the positioning of our shoulder x-rays, namely the external and internal rotations of those exams. Because we have to check those epicondyles to ensure the arm has been turned and rotated the correct direction to demonstrate the anatomy that we want to see in profile. And the key word there is profile. We're going to be talking about a specific landmark on the humerus, or two rather, that being the greater and lesser tubercles, which need to be in profile depending on how the arm is turned. And that's how we can identify what exam we're looking at, even if it's not labeled on the x-ray itself. Now, I'm spending some time talking about that because that's a very critical thing to know that the registry loves to ask. They love to ask questions related to the proximal humerus and how it relates to shoulder x-rays. And I'll show you what we're talking about with some demonstration here in a few minutes. All right, so when we talk about the shoulder girdle, this is a change from Bontrager. Make note, Anthony, you know how I despise Bontrager. Bontrager said that the proximal humerus was part of the shoulder girdle. Merrill's has since updated that, and the shoulder girdle is only consisting of the clavicle and the scapula solely. The proximal humerus is not considered part of the shoulder girdle. Now your book states that, but make sure you write that down because you may hear some differing facts on that from classmates, texts, so on and so forth. But what Merrill states is the gold standard of what the registry will ask. And once again, when it comes to shoulder girdle, clavicle and scapula only comprise the shoulder girdle, not proximal humerus, even though we are going to talk about that chapter and talk about the positioning of the humerus as well. So really, these two things right here, that's your shoulder girdle.
Supposedly someone invented a straw to cure hiccups.
A straw to cure hiccups.
Like you just drink water through it and
My x-ray teacher told us the technique of curing hiccups involved like trying to drink out of a cup with a straw balanced on your forehead, something like that. She said like you apply a certain amount of pressure to your forehead, try to drink out the cup, and it cures the hiccups. Really what it was, it distracted you so much from the hiccups you forgot about them and quit hiccuping. It worked. Huh? Why do hiccups happen? Something to do with the way your stomach is contracting, like air gets in the stomach and it's trying to get it out, almost like a burp, a little bit. Yeah. Your peristalsis is acting up.
That's what I thought you were telling me.
Okay, let's talk about the proximal humerus, guys. A lot of very critical anatomy right here, guys. Of course, those tuberosities or tubercles that we just talked about. Now, make sure you know both the names. They are used interchangeably. We have the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle, also called the greater tuberosity and the lesser tuberosity. Two critical pieces of anatomy when it comes to our positioning of the humerus. Why? Because we want one of those two to be in profile when we position for humerus x-rays or shoulder x-rays. And we will see those very predominantly on our x-rays. Now, in between the tubercles, we have one of my favorite pieces of anatomy, the intertubular groove. Did she already use my line?
Yeah.
Intertubular groove. Did she tell you that came from the 38-year-old Ninja Turtles? Because they used to say tubular all the time, like tubular, man, tubular, cowabunga. That's the intertubular groove. Sounds funny, but you'll never forget it. You can just say it just like that. That is found in between both the tubercles, but it's also got an alternative name, that being the bicipital groove. They can be used interchangeably. Make sure you know both the names. Intertubular groove or bicipital groove. Now, of course, you have the head of the humerus. If you were a caveman using this as a club, that's what you want to hit somebody on the head with, the head of the humerus. You ever see the cavemen with their clubs? They're made out of a humerus or a femur. They always club them with the head. That's the hardest part of it. That's what fits into that shoulder girdle, forming that ball and socket joint. Right there, ball going into socket. That allows you to move your arm in all directions. Also a very common dislocated body part, as some of you may have seen already or have family members that have done so. You ever seen them put an arm back into socket? Makes that little cracking noise when they do it. Kind of gross. Happens quite a bit. That is the head of the humerus. Now we have two necks on the humerus. Very important to know because that is one of the few bones in the body that has that distinction of having two different necks. As you've already realized, we've always just talked about the radial neck, ulnar neck, so on and so forth. But with the humerus, we have what's called the surgical neck and the anatomical neck. Anatomical neck, is found right near the head of the humerus. Surgical neck is found right below the tubercles, approximately this area right here, guys, where I put my finger. That is your surgical neck. Anatomical neck, you can actually make out the little line going around the humerus here. If you have any of those on your table, you can see what I'm talking about. It's your anatomical versus your surgical. Why is that called the surgical neck? Did she review that with you?
Most fractured.
That's the most commonly fractured area of the humerus where most surgeries will occur. Thus, they were nice to us. They didn't come up with a complicated name. They just called it the surgical neck. Makes sense. Of course, as we go down, guys, we have an attachment point, which you can't see this on x-rays, but good to know. Deltoid tuberosity is where your deltoid muscles attach to the humerus. And then, of course, the shaft or the long portion of the humerus. So all very critical pieces of anatomy to make sure you know, especially those tubercles. And all of these, aside from the deltoid tuberosity, we can actually see on the x-rays that we're going to be reviewing. So make note of all those pieces of anatomy. Yes? How do you know? How you know? Basically, it's the area just right below the tubercles right here. So it's never going to be down here. It's going to be closer to the proximal portion up here. There's no actual line, but you're always safe putting it right in this region right here. Right here. So you're never going to put it down here. It wouldn't make sense. Close to the tubercles. Make sense?
Sir, any of the images is the deltoid?
So like I said, deltoid tuberosity you're not going to see on an x-ray. But it is good to know that's an attachment point for the deltoid muscles. All right, so right here, guys, we can make out quite a bit of the anatomy that I just talked about. This is a shoulder x-ray. Specifically, this will be what we call the external AP shoulder. Now, why is it called external? Because whenever I do this x-ray, and you're going to be practicing this tomorrow and Thursday, we're going to put the patient in an AP position. We're going to take the hand and we're going to turn it externally like so. Here I am standing neutral. When I turn my hand externally, that's what we're seeing demonstrated right here. Now, when I do this, it's going to put a certain piece of the anatomy on the proximal humerus in profile. That being letter B right here, that greater tubercle. You can go ahead and write that down. We're going to review that more in a little bit. When I'm doing an AP external rotation shoulder, my greater tubercle of the proximal humerus is placed in profile. Very important to know that because if you were given an x-ray like this on your registry, and they'll give you a plain x-ray that looks just like this and say, what position is this patient in? You'd have to look at this and identify that as an external rotation. How do we know that? We've got that prominent tuberosity right there. There's a little bump coming out the side and profile. Whenever I do the opposite of that, which is an internal rotation, this is going to disappear, and we're going to see this lesser tubercle on this side in profile. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a little bit. But what can we name on this picture based on what we just looked at, guys? Without looking at your notes, who can tell me what letter A is? That's the head of the humerus. What about letter B? I just told y'all that one. Greater tubercle. What about C? That's my favorite.
Lesser tubercle. Oh.
Nothing, say it aloud. Say it like a Ninja Turtle. It helps.
Tubular.
The intertubular groove. That's right. That's right. You see that little line? That's that tubular groove. Not always identifiable on an X-ray. Depends on the specific anatomy. But when we see it, it's going to look like that nice prominent line. Now, of course, right next to it, we have another bump that's superimposed. What's letter D? That'll be your lesser tubercle. Lesser tubercle. Surgical neck's actually going to be identified by F right here, guys. So this region right here is that surgical neck. Anatomical neck will be where you see that line going straight through here. Now that's not actually on the anatomy, they drew that line. So don't be fooled, you're not always going to see that. If we follow it though, based on the anatomy, you see that little line I'm tracing my finger on? Right there, that's that anatomical neck you see right there. And of course, the shaft of the humerus. Making sense so far? Nothing too crazy? All right. Now you'll see this little dot here. We're going to review this more here in a second. This is telling us that those epicondyles are in a certain position for this specific type of x-ray. So go ahead and write this down because this is a concept that you need to master. When we do an AP external rotation shoulder, the epicondyles are placed parallel to the IR. That means they're side by side, they're parallel to the IR. And remember, we have two epicondyles, that medial and that lateral. AP, external rotation, they're epicondyle to the IR. They are parallel to the IR. Parallel to the IR.
During the
AP
AP.
humor. AP external.
Go ahead, John,
Go
you
ahead.
go first. You have a question?
It's during the AP external rotation. The
AP external rotation, the epicondyles are parallel to IR. Question?
So the external rotation is this.
So external rotation is when I'm standing in an AP, like you see the lady right here. Here I am neutral. External rotation is when I turn my hand externally. And we're gonna go over that more in positioning, so don't worry about that too much now. Right now we're just focused on anatomy. All right, let's start talking about those parts of the shoulder girdle now. That's all you need to know for the proximal humerus, by the way. Now, once again, that consists of only clavicle and scapula. You can expect to see a question on that on your test. We're probably going to list more anatomy, but you have to pick out what's part of your shoulder girdle. That is only clavicle and scapula, and I will put proximal humerus in there. Make sure you're writing that down. Make sure you realize, and you see how it's kind of invisible there? It's giving you a clue. It's invisible because that's the only portion of your shoulder girdle. Now, you can expect as an answer as well. These are two connection points of that shoulder girdle. Shoulder girdle connects to the humerus, but it also connects to the manubrium. Manubrium is what the manubrium is a part of. The sternum, correct. It forms what we call the SC joint right there, sternoclavicular joints. Remember what I'm saying when you're trying to identify joints, the easiest way to remember them is you just think about the two pieces of anatomy connecting. So if I'm just going blank, well, I got a clavicle, I have a sternum, so sternoclavicular joint. I have a humerus, I have a scapula, humeroscapular joints, or scapulohumeral joint. They can be used in either order. Easiest way to remember those. All right, some information on your shoulder girdle. The head of the humerus laterally is going to connect with that shoulder joint. It's going to connect with it laterally. The manubrium of the sternum is going to be the medial connection point. So we're talking about the lateral side of the body and the medial. The shoulder girdle connects medially to the manubrium, laterally to the humerus. That's what that's stating right there, via that SC joint and that shoulder joint. Now, the shoulder girdle connects also at the AC joint. That's going to be the acromioclavicular joint. So the clavicle connects at 2 points. Make sure I got this correct here. Yep, here we go. So right here on my body, the clavicle is connecting to the sternum. It's also connecting to the acromion of the scapula. If you don't know what the acromion is, we're going to review that in a second. So clavicle connects at 2 points, connects at the sternum and the acromion via two different joints, AC and SC joints. Now, what's the function of the shoulder girdle? To connect the upper limbs to the trunk of the body. That's its main function, upper limb to the trunk of the body. Coffee's not good when you're dehydrated. I have to have my coffee. So I got Gatorade too. Coffee and Gatorade, that's a breakfast of champions there.
Throw a banana in there, you should be good.
True.
Potassium.
All right, some more information, guys. Once again, I'm stating this again because I don't want anybody to make this mistake, and someone's probably gonna make this mistake. Please prove me wrong. Humerus is not considered to be a part of the shoulder girdle. Why? Because the upper portion articulates with the shoulder girdle. Proximal humeral anatomy is considered an evaluation of images of the shoulder joint. The main point is, guys, I forgot to turn the TVs on, I'm sorry. Humerus is not part of that shoulder girdle, even though we're going to talk about it quite a bit throughout this chapter. Do not let that fool you. Easy mistake to make. Okay, I need to make a little announcement here. Apparently, it's come to my knowledge by a source that will remain anonymous that there have been people clocking other people in a clinic. Please keep in mind that this is a very serious infraction against the rules, and if you are discovered doing so, it could lead to an immediate dismissal. So I'm going to be following up on this. Please make sure that is not occurring. I'll do some investigation on trajectories because that is a very serious issue. So I don't know who or where that's occurring. Could be solo for all I know, but make sure it's not happening with you guys. Announcement to your class as well. Big deal. Big deal. And there is a way to follow up on that, guys, so don't think that can remain hidden. I can actually source exactly who's clocking in, where, when, how, whatever. There's a paper trail to that. Please be careful.
You said it's an automatic dismissal?
I said it could be. It'd have to go against it'd have to go before the administrative committee. Yes.
Is it not correct to open one person's register and sign off from that,
You
everybody?
need to log into your specific login
Oh, I
and
see.
clock
We
in.
haven't done that though, we've been
Because you'll
doing
end up
it in a
clocking
group.
in with somebody else's paper trail.
Oh,
No,
wait,
she's
so,
saying
Like the login.
so we have been
computer.
doing that,
Oh,
so.
no, that's, if you're logging, as long as you log into your trajectories, if you're, I thought you meant,
Yeah.
I thought you were saying log into someone else's trajectories.
So when you log into
No, that's
Trajectories
fine.
and clock out, it automatically logs out.
Yeah.
So that you're ready for the next person.
Be careful with that, guys. Please take that very seriously. That's a big deal. Don't clock in for anybody. I don't care if you're running late, just give us a call, guys. Explain what's going on. We'll be more than patient with that. Just communicate. Please communicate. All right, guys. A bit about the joints. We're talking about the shoulder joint specifically. When I say shoulder joint, that is the connection of the humerus to the scapula. That is going to be a diarthrodial joint, also synovial and ball and socket type. There are a few more joints other than just that. We'll discuss those more in detail in a minute. This is just the shoulder joint, where the head of the humerus is fitting into the scapula, diarthrodial, synovial, ball and socket type. So guys, I'm telling y'all, just be careful. These techs, they will rat you out. That's all I'm gonna say. When you think they're not gonna rat you out, they're being all buddy with you, they will rat you out. Not that they're trying to get you in trouble, they're just testing you to see if you follow the rules. Although some may be trying to get you in trouble, I don't know, but I'm trying to think the best of some people. Just be careful. Be careful.
So when you say diarthrodial by function, is that
It's freely movable. It's a freely movable joint.
that's
Synovial means it's a synovial capsule.
oh okay.
All right, so let's talk about the clavicle. Big point that people often forget because it is a small bone. It's actually classified as a long bone because it has those epiphyses on the ends, the diaphysis in the middle. Please make sure you make note that it is classified as a long bone. The acromial extremity is the end on the lateral aspect. So this is the side where your humerus is over here. That's the lateral aspect, that's your acromial extremity. That's going to be what articulates with the acromion of the scapula, which will sit about right here. So if you look on this little thing right here, this little model, here's the clavicle. Humerus fits right here. Here's the acromion extremity that you're seeing on the diagram, and there is the AC joint, acromioclavicular joint attaching to the scapula. Make a little more sense? See that? So what's on the other end? We have the sternal extremity, and that's going to articulate with the sternum, forming the SC joints. It articulates with that manubrium of the sternum. So lateral aspect, medial aspect, right here. You do need to know these specific pieces of anatomy, because we can see these on the x-rays. Acromial extremity and sternal extremity, and of course in the middle is the body where it curves. Yes?
I have a pretty good way to remember either or.
What you got?
The AC joint, if you have the AC too low, you automatically like shiver. You reach for your AC joint.
That's pretty good.
Manubrium of sternum, man of steel. So it looks like the little Superman emblem. It's in the middle of your chest.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Did y'all hear that?
No.
Why don't you do a little loud? Give them a demonstration, Jay. A little bit louder.
If you have the AC too low, you shiver. You reach for your AC joint. the manubrium of sternum sounds like man of steel, and that's the little Superman emblem. It's in the middle of your chest, and it actually almost spells it. So man of and then sternum steel. So
It's pretty good. Pretty good. I like the AC one especially. You shiver, you reach for that area. Pretty good. Double curve to the body, and fun little fact. I don't know why this is. If you can figure it out, let me know. The curve is actually more pronounced in males and females. For the clavicle. Males, you got a curvier clavicle than the females.
is that because our shoulders are broader?
Could be with the broader shoulders, I'm not sure.
Gang.
And so if you want to look that up and see why, I didn't have time to look it up, but that'd be my best guess too, yes. Yes. All right, the scapula. So this is probably going to be the area that we talk about that has the most anatomy. And scapular anatomy can get kind of complex and scary, but it's really not that bad. Not that bad overall. This is the last bit of anatomy for this chapter, so sigh of relief. Not as much as the last chapter. Big deal to remember, it is classified as a flat bone, and if you look at a scapula, it should be easy to figure out, it's very flat. Is it not? Very flat bone. So it is classified as a flat bone. It forms that posterior portion of the shoulder girdle, and it is, of course, triangular in shape. Now, what kind of anatomy do we need to focus on? Well, pretty much everything you see on this model. So here's our humerus, once again, with that greater and lesser tubercle, bicipital groove, or intertubular groove. We're going to start right here with what we call the glenoid cavity. Glenoid cavity is this indention that you see right here where that little hook is hanging out of. Why is that significant? Once again, that's where the head of the humerus fits into the scapula to form our shoulder joint or scapulohumeral joint. But the actual recess itself is called the glenoid cavity. Now this is where I want you to be careful. Depending on what they're asking you. If they're asking for the landmark, it's glenoid cavity. If they're asking for the joint, it's scapulohumeral joint. Let me say it again. If they're asking for the landmark on the bone, it's glenoid cavity. If they're asking for the joint, it's scapulohumeral joint. Make sense? Because they kind of overlap on top of each other. So you have to be careful there.
It's not glenohumeral?
The what?
Glenohumeral or scapular?
Scapulohumeral. Be careful on that. All right, so right behind the, oriented correctly here, right behind the glenoid cavity is this area right here. Like every bone, it has a neck. That's going to be your scapular neck, right there where my finger's pointing. Neck of the scapula, right behind that glenoid fossa or glenoid cavity. By the way, write that down. It can be called glenoid cavity or glenoid fossa. There's another name for it. Glenoid cavity or glenoid fossa. Now, if you palpate those scapula on your desk, you can feel there's a bit of an indentation here on the front of your scapula. This is the anterior surface we're looking at. So if it was sitting on the body, it would be sitting like so. This is my right scapula. There's a very strong indentation here. That is the subscapular fossa. Subscapular fossa. It's a flat area on the anterior surface of the scapula. Right below that is going to be what we call the body. So we have a subscapular fossa. Inferior to that is the body of the scapula. So be careful because it depends on where the arrow is pointing. If the arrow is pointing up here, subscapular fossa. Down here, it's the body on that flat interior surface. Okay so far? Let's go to the outer structures. We have that acromion we were talking about. The acromion is this area that juts out on the lateral aspect of your scapula. We can see that very clear on x-rays. It's a very important landmark. Now, right below that is probably one of my favorite pieces of anatomy, and you can always guarantee I'm going to ask this of you because I just love to ask it. We have the coracoid process. Very prominent structure on the anterior aspect. Very important palpation point for your shoulder x-rays that you have to learn to palpate tomorrow and Thursday. If you rub on your shoulder right up here, you can feel a little bump of bone. You have to find it right in the right spot. Some people you have to palpate kind of hard because they're all different sizes on different people. If you feel that little bump right there, that is your coracoid process. And that's what we're going to use for centering for our AP shoulder and scapula x-rays. Coracoid process. Anybody find theirs?
Only this side, sir.
You just gotta dig in sometimes. Some people have small ones, some people have large ones. And you gotta practice palpating that on your partners, guys. That's key to centering correctly. Dig your hands in there. Right here is where mine is.
So you would feel the.
It's a little bump. A little bump.
Yeah.
You feel it? So that's going to be very important, whoever your partner is, that you identify exactly where that is. Because if you don't, you will not center correctly for your x-rays on the scapula or the shoulder. So very important landmark. Let's move a little bit more medial, guys. Right here, we have a little notch. See the little notch there? Excuse me. That wasn't a sneeze, it was just a reflux burp thing. It's, we have the scapular notch right here, guys. Thank you, though. I appreciate the blessing. Thank you. Scapular notch right here, guys. Scapular notch, another very important landmark. Now you'll notice on the scapula we have two pairs of three important landmarks. We have 3 angles and we have 3 borders. Now you can only see 2 of the 3 angles here, but I'll show you where the other one is. But we can see all 3 borders. We have the superior border at the top. Talking about the directional terms once again, guys. Superior border, medial border, lateral border. It's basically labeled where it is on that bone. Make sense? Lateral border, medial border, superior border. Then we have our 3 angles. We have the superior angle, inferior angle, and we have a lateral angle that's kind of hidden in this massive bone. 2 you can always readily make out on your x-rays, your superior and your inferior angles. So it's where it comes to a point. Superior angle, inferior angle. Making sense? Follow me so far? All right, so there we have it, guys. There we have it once again. The main surfaces, borders, and angles, all very important things to remember, guys. The 2 surfaces, costal and dorsal. Costal means the anterior surface. Dorsal means the posterior, just like we talked about with all that terminology last semester. The 3 borders, the lateral, the medial, the superior, and those 3 angles, superior, inferior, and lateral. But once again, the lateral angle you will not see on an x-ray. You will only see the superior and inferior angles. Keep that in mind. Know that there's 3, but you can only ever see 2 on an x-ray. Now right here, this is that costal surface we were just talking about, guys. Here is our dorsal surface. We're looking at it from behind here. So you see how it's flipped? Don't let that throw you off, because there's our acromion still, our cohort process, there's the notch, there's our borders and angles. But we do have something new here, guys. We have what's called the crest of the spine of the scapula. That's this area right here. If you look on the back side of your scapula, there's an actual little crest going across it. Crest or the spine of the scapula. We can see this on our lateral scapula x-rays. Little spine. Scapular spine would be the shorthand way of saying that. Scapular spine. And when we talk about the actual surface on the posterior side of the scapula, it's called the infraspinous fossa. So we have the subscapular fossa on the front, infraspinous fossa on the back. If you want to know where that lateral angle is, guys, it's right here, right at the bottom of that glenoid fossa. But this is the one that we don't really see on an x-ray. We only see that inferior and superior angle. Still okay? That's all the anatomy of this chapter. That's all the anatomy of this chapter, yes. Of course, we're going to start identifying this on x-rays in a minute, and we're going to be building these on Wednesday, by the way. Wednesday's going to be another Play-Doh project day. We'll announce that. Excuse me. All right, let's move on. Let's start labeling this on an x-ray. Now, take a look at this x-ray. What do you notice first on that x-ray? There's a nice, pretty dotted red line on there. See where that scapula is? You don't have to get used to that. That's just to orient you for this anatomy. Your x-rays will not have that nice little red line around it. You're gonna have to identify that scapula yourself. Oh, excuse me, I'm out of breath. I'll take a break here in a second. Let's try and name this anatomy we just talked about, guys. Letter A. Letter A is talking about that protrusion coming off the side here. It's that connection point with the clavicle as well. What do y'all think that is? That would be your acromion, correct. That's where the clavicle connects on the lateral aspect. Letter B What do y'all think that is? It's right behind that little opening there.
Is it behind?
So,
The crest is
basically, it is this area right here, guys. Remember what that is? Every bone, every long bone usually has this. The neck. That's the neck of your scapula, right there. Letter C. A little hard to see. There's a little indentation going down right there. Little thing going down right here. That would be your scapular notch. That's that little notch right here, guys. A little hard to see, but y'all see that little tuberosity coming off the clavicle there? It fits into that notch. That's why you have a little notch there for the clavicle to fit into it. Letter D is actually pointing to a rib. Does anybody know what rib that is?
First.
Incorrect. I'm glad you said that though, because it's a very common mistake. That is your second rib. Here's your first rib, which curves very sharply, followed by your second rib. Let's go to letter E. What would letter E be, guys? It's pretty easy.
Medial border.
Medial border. Medial border. F.
Inferior angle.
Inferior angle. G. Lateral border. Now, what else can we name here, guys? What would this protrusion here be? That's that coracoid. Always know where that coracoid is. And not just because I love it, the registry loves that one too. It is one of my favorite ones to make you label. What about this little, what would be the landmark name for this little concaved area? The glenoid what? Cavity or fossa. What would be the joint name for it?
Scapulohumeral.
Scapulohumeral joint. What would be this portion of the humerus? Humeral head. We can't really see it, but what would which neck would be approximately right here? Anatomical neck. Very good. Very good. All right. Any questions on that? Is it making sense so far? Let's take a quick break, guys. I gotta catch my breath. I'm still kind of weak, so take a 15-minute break, guys. Come back at 9:05, and we will continue moving forward here. Whew. I might have you, yes. Actually, it's supposed to sort of